Good morning, everyone. My name is Chen Yijie, a project manager and junior research fellow working at the Stockholm Taiwan Center at the Institute for Security and Development Policy, ISDP. I'm delighted to moderate this webinar focusing on Taiwan's strategy in the Indo-Pacific region and EU-Taiwan relations amid the Trump administration 2.0. Today's webinar includes two speakers. They will give 20 minutes presentation respectively. After the presentation, we will proceed with the Q&A session. So yesterday and today, the Yushan Forum is taking place in Taipei. This forum, launched by Taiwan, serves as a key platform for fostering regional dialogue. This year, the forum is titled New South Policy Plus, Taiwan, the Indo-Pacific, and the New World. Given this context, it's a perfect moment to discuss Taiwan's role in the Indo-Pacific region and explore the growing ties between Taiwan and the EU. So Taiwan has focused much more on advancing its role in the Indo-Pacific region since former President Tsai Ing-wen first came into office in 2016. And with the continuation of her policy, President Lai Ching-te aims to decouple Taiwan from China further. And apart from Taiwan's increasing engagement in the Indo-Pacific region in 2024, last year, the EU signed a joint motion supporting Taiwan, condemning China's misinterpretation of United Nations General Assembly Resolution 2758 and China's gray zone military actions. The motion also opened for a future investment agreement. And this indicates the EU aims to deepen its relationship with Taiwan and seeks space to strengthen its role in the Indo-Pacific region. On the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, with the inauguration of US President Trump, Taiwan may have to more actively diversify its foreign partners to expand its international presence through maybe strengthening collaboration on trade, innovation, technology, or regional security. And today, our two amazing speakers will provide many insights about this subject. So the first speaker is Dr. Jin Bo-jun. He is a senior research fellow at the Oxford Taiwan Studies program within the Oxford School of Global and Area Studies. He is also an associated research fellow at ISDP. His research and publications primarily focus on Taiwan-Southeast Asia relations, Taiwan's cybersecurity strategy, and the international relations of the Indo-Pacific region. Dr. Jin is the author of the monograph titled Taiwan and Southeast Asia, Opportunities and Constraints of Continued Engagement. He holds a PhD in International Political Economy from King's College, London. And our second speaker is Dr. Simona Graino. She is currently head of the research area China-Taiwan Relations and senior lecturer at the University of Zurich, with a focus on Chinese and Taiwanese studies. Dr. Graino has held research positions and taught China studies and Taiwan studies at Ca' Foscari University of Venice in Italy, at the University of Zurich in Switzerland, and a National Zhenji University in Taiwan. She's also a research fellow of the European Research Center on Contemporary Taiwan in Tübingen, Germany, a research associate of SOAS London, and senior fellow on Taiwan at the Center for China Analysis in New York. Dr. Graino's latest co-edited volume discussed China-US competition, impact on small and middle powers' strategic choices. And without further ado, we extend a warm welcome to the first speaker, Dr. Jin Bo-jun. The floor is yours.
Thank you, EJ. Yes, sorry, it took me a while to unmute myself. Can you see the slides? Is it working? Okay, perfect. Thank you, EJ, for your kind introduction. And many thanks to ISDP friends for having me today. It's really nice to be back to ISDP Taiwan Lecture Series. And it's my pleasure to join Simona in this session. Today, I'm tasked with talking about Taiwan's new Southbound Policy Plus, or NSP Plus. And my title is Contextualizing Taiwan's NSP Plus towards Southeast Asia. As EJ pointed out, we really couldn't have picked a better time to talk about the NSP Plus. So just yesterday in Taipei, President Lai Ching-te officially introduced this initiative at the 8th Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation's Yushan Forum, which, as many of you know, as pointed out by Ijie, that it's been the flagship program or platform for promoting the NSP under Tsai Ing-wen administration. And when we were scheduling this online lecture, we knew it would happen sometime in spring, but we had no idea it would line up so perfectly with Lai's announcement. So well done to us on the timing, Ijie and Simona. Okay, and okay, all right, so but coincidence aside, what exactly is the plus in NSP plus? That's the key question, right? We're all curious about today. According to Lai's opening speech yesterday, the core theme of NSP plus is smart technology. These include smart healthcare, smart transportation, resilient semiconductor supply chains. Beyond that, Lai also underscored Taiwan's achievement as a Silicon Island and its goal of becoming an AI island as a next step, with ambitions to lead in quantum technology and the precision medicine. Given Taiwan's world-class chips industry, it's no surprise that Lai placed such strong emphasis on these sectors when laying out his vision for NSP plus. What did surprise me, however, was that he did not mention Southeast Asia even once. Well, instead of emphasizing Southeast Asia, Lai used this platform to highlight Taiwan's Indo-Pacific vision and the island's readiness to go eastward toward the Americas. These next paragraphs from his speech are particularly interesting, so I'll just read them directly. He said, quote, in the past, Taiwanese industries moved westward, in Chinese word, 西进, across the Taiwan Strait, then shifted southbound, Nanxiang, and later sought closer cooperation with the north, Beihe. But now we are confidently stepping across the Pacific, reaching eastward, Dongtuo in Chinese, to the Americas and other regions. While staying firmly rooted in Taiwan, our enterprises are expanding their global presence and marketing worldwide, unquote. This is a clear reference to TSMC's recent $100 billion investment plan in Arizona, a clear signal of Taiwan's deeper economic ties with the US. And Lai then continued, quote, through international cooperation, we hope to build an even more inclusive, resilient, and prosperous Indo-Pacific, while jointly defending the democracy, freedom, and peace we so firmly believe in, unquote. So if we read between the lines, NSP plus might actually mean a new, I will term it a new omnibound policy, which is expanding Taiwan's global reach in every direction except westward to China. After all, from Lai's and the DPP's perspective, China is not a so-called like-minded partner in the Indo-Pacific strategy. And this photo tells us EU is included in the NSP plus. Take a look at the VVIP guest speaker standing right next to President Lai, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, former Prime Minister of Denmark and the former NATO Secretary General. And next to him, between Rasmussen and the AIT Director Raymond Green, is Janez Janša, a former Prime Minister of Slovenia. So this arrangement signals that the scope of the NSP Plus has expanded beyond its traditional focus on Southeast Asia and is now closely aligning with Taiwan's broader Indo-Pacific strategy. Well, although the Lai administration has yet to lay out detailed policy guidelines for NSP Plus, I think that Southeast Asia will remain a key pillar of Taiwan's foreign policy. With that in mind, let's take a quick look at Taiwan's diplomatic landscape in the region. We all know that Taiwan lost its UN seat in 1971 and formal diplomatic ties with the US in 1979. So the 70s were particularly difficult for Taiwan's foreign relations, including in Southeast Asia. In 1974, Taiwan lost consular relations with Malaysia following the end of the Vietnam War. Taiwan lost official ties with South Vietnam. shortly after the Philippines and Thailand also severed diplomatic relations with Taiwan. So by the early 90s, as Singapore and Brunei established diplomatic ties with Beijing, all ASEAN member states have adhered to their own one China policies, recognizing Beijing over Taipei. Despite these setbacks, Taiwan has managed to establish de facto diplomatic missions in 8 out of the 10 ASEAN countries. The exceptions are Laos and Cambodia, which are often regarded as bandwagoning states aligned closely with China. Most of the missions are named Taipei Economic and Cultural Office. In addition to these, Taiwan also operates 2 de facto consulates in Southeast Asia, one in Surabaya, Indonesia, and another in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. These offices focus on promoting trade and managing affairs related to migrant workers. On the economic front, we need to discuss the processes of regionalization and regionalism. In the 80s and 90s, East Asia's economic ties began to deepen through market-driven regionalization, characterized by the expansion of production and commercial networks at the market level. In this bottom-up process, Taiwanese business people, or commonly known as Taishan, play a pivotal role. They leverage their abundant capital and technical expertise to invest in Southeast Asia, drawn not only by the region's geographic proximity to Taiwan, but also by its rich endowments of natural resources, labor supply, and spacious industrial land. As a result, Taiwan has since become one of the largest sources of FDI and a key trading partner in the region. However, since the outbreak of the 1997 Asian financial crisis, the bottom-up process of regionalization in East Asia has gradually been supplemented by a top-down state-led agenda of regionalism. The emergence of the ASEAN Plus 3 APT mechanism and the proliferation of FTAs are 2 major manifestations of East Asian regionalism. Unfortunately, due to its contested statehood, Taiwan has been unable to participate in these major processes, and as a result, it has been somewhat marginalized in regional economic integration. In the face of these challenges, the past 4 administrations have all made efforts to strengthen economic trade ties with ASEAN region. In 1994, Li Denghui introduced the Go South policy, along with detailed guidelines for engaging with Southeast Asia. And the policy guidelines were continued under Chen Shui-bian and Ma Ying-jeou before Tsai Ing-wen rebranded and expanded the initiative as the new Southbound Policy. The previous Southbound initiatives led by Li Denghui and Chen Shui-bian focused on encouraging Taiwanese manufacturing companies to establish their factories in Southeast Asia, taking advantage of the region's low-cost labor. In contrast, Ma Ying-jeou's approach prioritized tapping into the growing consumer markets in ASEAN and strengthening educational ties with the region. Despite their differing emphasis, all these policy guidelines share the common goal of promoting economic engagement with Southeast Asia to diversify Taiwan's international trade and reduce the risk of exclusion from regional economic integration. And under Tsai Ing-wen's presidency, these strategic objectives have remained consistent. However, the NSP has placed greater emphasis on fostering people-to-people connectivity, more on South Power side. Besides their differing focuses, I think it's important to highlight a major distinction between the KMT and the DPP, namely their contrasting strategies and attitudes toward mainland China. On the one hand, while Ma Ying-jeou and most KMT politicians are not blind to the threat from Beijing, they believe in the potential economic and diplomatic benefits of positive engagement across the Taiwan Strait, and grounding in the 1992 consensus. Consequently, the Ma administration prioritized improving ties with China, hoping this would create more international space for Taiwan. Well, by the end of his tenure, Ma argued that the peaceful development of cross-strait relations had a spillover effect, contributing to stronger relationships with the US, Japan, the EU, and ASEAN countries. On the other hand, Tsai Ing-wen and the majority of DPP members, and also the current president, Lai Ching-te, view China as a significant threat. They argue that increasing economic interdependence across the Taiwan Strait would make Taiwan vulnerable to China's economic leverage, ultimately endangering the island's security. So unlike Ma's emphasis on cross-strait reconciliation, Tsai and Lai prefers to engage with the international community without becoming overly entangled in cross-strait dynamics. So Lai and Tsai have rejected the 1992 consensus, arguing it is a one country, two systems framework. And without their acceptance of this framework, the PRC has intensified efforts to block Taiwan's regional and international participation. Whose approach has been more effective in Southeast Asia? We examined Ma's achievements. His administration signed an FTA-like agreement with Singapore under the name SDEP in 2013, following the signing of the ECFA, the Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement between Taiwan and China in 2010. Ma also managed to visit Singapore twice, and in 2015, his first trip was to pay respect to Lee Kuan Yew after his passing, and his second visit was for the historic Ma Xi meeting. The Ma administration also opened Taiwan's first ever representative office in Myanmar, marking a diplomatic milestone. However, despite the warming of cross-strait relations during his tenure, Ma's ASEAN Plus 4 plan ultimately did not pan out. As for Thai, her administration signed a new bilateral investment agreement with the Philippines in December 2017 and another new BIA with Vietnam in December 2019. Moreover, the Thai administration formally submitted its application to join the CPTPP on September 22nd, 2021, just a week after China submitted a request to join the CPTPP. Although it may not be an achievement yet, it's a good progress. As for the people-to-people ties, a few years before COVID-19, there has been an increase in Southeast Asian tourists and students in Taiwan. Also, Taiwanese public awareness or knowledge base about Southeast Asia has arguably been raised in recent years. If I may share my 2 cents on the direction of Taiwan-Southeast Asia relations under Lai, on the international level, I believe his administration will strive to maintain peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, align its NSP plus with major powers' Indo-Pacific strategies, as mentioned earlier. And I think he will focus on lobbying CPTPP members to approve Taiwan's application to this significant mega trade deal. However, achieving CPTPP membership will be a daunting uphill task. On the regional level, the Lai government is expected to continue diversifying Taiwan's external economic portfolio by enhancing trade and investment ties with ASEAN countries. A key objective will be to sign more FTAs with ASEAN members, although this will be extremely challenging due to ongoing Chinese pressure. A relatively more achievable goal would be promoting people-to-people connectivity through initiatives in higher education, tourism, and medical cooperation. From the perspective of ASEAN countries, their hope is that Lai will maintain the status quo and ensure peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. Because in such a scenario, Southeast Asia could continue benefiting from economic collaboration with Taiwan, especially given Taiwan's active foreign direct investment in the region and its crucial role in the global supply chain for semiconductors and in AI industries. Okay, so finally, as a hardcore baseball fan, I have to I know EJ is also a big sports fan. Yeah, so I have to include this slide of the Taipei Dome, which officially opened in December 2023, so like 15 months ago. It's also Taiwan's one and only dome, making it a major milestone for the country's sports and entertainment scene. Hopefully, one day this venue will host a Major League Baseball Taipei series, especially since the Tokyo series is happening in Tokyo this week. And Shohei Ohtani, all the big stars are playing. I know we're in Europe, we're in the UK. Baseball is not big, but however, I think it's very big in East Asia. Or perhaps one day a Taylor Swift concert will take place here, maybe. Of course, that depends on whether geopolitical risks across the Taiwan Strait remain manageable, and whether Taiwan can convince our friends in Singapore to stop monopolizing the Swifty economy in the region. Okay, with that, thank you very much for attention.
Thank you, Dr. Jing. And yes, like you, I'm a big sports fan, and it's nice to know that someone in this field is also focused on the sports perspective. And thank you for the timely and informative presentation. And I already have several questions that I would like to ask you, but I think I should not steal time from our second speaker. So let's welcome the second speaker. The floor is yours, Dr. Simona Guarino.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I'm not a sport fan at all, but I'm grateful to you for the Dajudan, because this was one of my case studies when I was working on environmental governance, and the Sunshan tobacco factory was being, diminished and torn down, and people protested. So it took me back to the one long field work I did. So, and I'd never seen it inside. So very grateful to you, Bujun. Okay, let me share for a very different topic now my desktop. I will be talking about, let me see. Presentation start. Can you see it? Okay, great. So I will be talking about mostly Europe and Taiwan in the Trump 2.0 era. And especially, let me see if I can show you, take this away. Yeah, oh, sorry. As you can see, now you can see it again, right? I'm going to go ahead and think that that was a yes. If not, just let me know. So what I'm going to do is today I'm going to talk to you about, first of all, in which sectors the relationship between Taiwan and Europe has actually seen a boost in the past, I would say 4 years. And then towards the latter part of the talk, I'll concentrate on how Trump and the geopolitical shifts that he's provoking are having an impact on the relationship, not only between the USA and Europe, but especially between Europe and Taiwan, right? And what I contend in this talk, which is taken from an article that is coming out tomorrow, is that there's been a shift in relationship in the past 4 years between Taiwan and Europe, through which Europe has started to pay much more attention to Taiwan, shifting a former focus that it had, which was putting a lot of emphasis on trade with China and therefore ignoring Taiwan for the best part. And the shift has, of course, been prompted by a variety of reasons, among them, of course, the corona pandemic and, of course, the whole supply chain debate when China was closed, but also, as I will show, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So I will concentrate in the first part mostly on the relationship between Europe and Taiwan in terms of technology, trade, and political cooperation. So when it comes to trade, there has been, I should say, a much more proactive policies by the EU towards Taiwan. And at the same time, Taiwan has sort of profited out of the escalated national security concerns that many European countries have felt towards China, a variety of scandals that have come out, of course, in terms of sabotage, espionage, but also, as I said, the real problem that when China was closed for a very long period of time during the corona pandemic, many countries started to realize that nothing went in and nothing came out, so there should be alternatives. And of course, Taiwan being quite a much more reliable in terms and to a certain extent extent also sharing our values, so that makes it even more valuable and reliable as supply chain partners, has profited, as I said, out of this shift. There is no trade deal, bilateral trade deal between Taiwan and Europe. However, trade remains strong. I have some statistics for you at the bottom of the slide. So bilateral trade reached $77 billion in 2023. And the EU was Taiwan's 4th largest trading partner in the same year, and Taiwan was the EU's 13th largest trading partner. Let's come, since I don't have so much time, to the second point that I mentioned, the cooperation in terms of the digital realm. So in 2021, the EU introduced a so-called digital compass, which was meant to enhance its own technological capacity and, of course, also to achieve societal transformation through this. And, of course, as you can imagine, Taiwan, due to its importance in the semiconductor industry, but not only, has been central in order to help Europe try to reduce its overdependence in certain sectors from China. And of course, central in these efforts is TSMC, or the Taiwanese. I don't think I have to explain. Everyone has heard the name, even those of us who are not particularly technologically oriented, because of course it is always in the media for its extreme overcapacity role in the production of semiconductor for the whole world. So of course, TSMC has been leveraging the so-called EU Chips Act to build also semiconductor fabs in Europe, and specifically in Germany, in Dresden. And of course, that's particularly important because, as you know, the German automakers industry is in need of chips. And so this German facility should concentrate, once it is operational, on manufacturing chips that are especially good for automotive applications and industrial applications. And the plant is expected to actually produce, as you have it here, 40,000 silicon wafers per month once it will be operational in 2027. Of course, this is part of a broader strategy, but also part of a so-called discussion whether Taiwan is or not eroding its own silicon shield by giving out this technology not only to Europe, but especially Arizona in the United States, and of course, already operational facilities, as we know, in Japan. Then the third point is what kind of, I have it, of course, in Anführungszeichen, in the diplomatic and political engagement have the EU and Taiwan been undergoing in the past few years. And these, of course, these nearing approaches with the EU, especially from the EU towards Taiwan, have a lot to do, I would say, with the more aggressive behavior that China has had towards Taiwan and in the Taiwan Strait, but also in other parts, for example, of the world, in the South China Sea, and also towards Hong Kong, which have brought, of course, a lot of attention on what is going on in the area. So in Europe, it's certainly the European Parliament, which has articulated most support for expanding ties with Taipei, and especially EGA already mentioned a few of the resolutions that were passed. Especially famous are the ones, or important, that were passed in 2024 in February, so more than 1 year ago, concerning this common foreign and security policy and common security and defense policy. And these resolutions are important because they include a language that was precedently not heard in Europe. So saying, for example, that neither Taiwan nor China are subordinate to each other, that only the Taiwanese democratically elected government can actually represent the Taiwanese people on the international stage, and of course condemning also unilateral attempts to change the status quo in the Taiwan Strait. Another important, but I have to note, non-binding resolution came out in October, about 10 days after Lai had given a speech for, of course, National Day, and China retaliated with this very wide military exercises in the Strait. And so the EP, once again, during a plenary debate, released a resolution where it strongly actually and rejected and refuted the PRC attempts to distort history and international rules. And of course, it was referring to the fact that more and more China tries to persuade the international community that UN resolution, as Bo-jun mentioned, 2758, actually settled the Taiwan question, whereas the only thing that was settled back then was actually to whom the China seat should go. Right, so before we go into Trump, I'm not going to go a lot in detail, but it was EGA's wish that I also would talk a little bit about Europe's focus towards the Indo-Pacific. And so It's, of course, quite an important region for us. And one of the main motivations as to why Europe is paying more attention is really Taiwan and the possibility of a conflict in the Taiwan Strait. Already in 2021, the Indo-Pacific strategy of the EU actually stated that the EU is fully aware that tensions in the area may have a very direct impact on European security and prosperity. And so that this really increases our attention to the importance of maintaining stability in the area, which is also a crucial, of course, shipping lane for 40% of the EU's external trade, and of course, for other countries in the region like Japan and South Korea. And of course, it's been Brussels taking the lead in building a more, I would say, resilient strategy to, first of all, counter China's interference attempts, but also, of course, to help Taiwan more, although there is a problem of a discrepancy between the EU per se as an institution and then different states themselves, who sometimes or very often are much more, of course, susceptible to internal and domestic variables, much more careful in supporting openly Taiwan. And I should say, now, specifically with the Trump administration, which I will address in a second, it's even more of a problem because, of course, the more there is distancing of the former transatlantic alliance, the more we risk that certain countries, especially countries that have big trade dependency from China, may be tempted to actually break this former unity and run, maybe it's a bit exaggerated, but run once again into the Chinese embrace. So very briefly, before I go into the Trump and the final part of the talk, we know that Taiwan, Bo-jun has talked about that in depth, of course, has been facing a lot of diplomatic isolation, but especially trade isolation since Tsai Ing-wen came back, or rather the DPP came back to power in 2016. And that is why, as we have seen in the former presentation, they have tried to highlight certain trade policies to diversify their trade. He has talked about the new Southbound Policy. There's also one that for me, it's quite interesting, that only relates to the United States, Taiwan, actually, bilateral trade relationship, which really addresses pertinent trade concerns, such as, for example, the possibility to enhance multilateral cooperation, small and medium-sized businesses, anti-corruption, and sound regulatory procedures. And one has to state that in 2024, the US once again became the #1 destination for Taiwan exports, supplanting China after decades. And that also, at the same time, Taiwanese investments into China in 2023 have tumbled to the lowest level in more than 20 years, dropping by nearly 40%, right? But I should be very honest and say that's not just the efforts of these policies or strategies being put through, but it is also, especially 2023, a real fully fledged pragmatic outcome of the fact that China was closed for a long time due to the corona pandemic in 2022. And so, of course, they had to diversify strategies, and many countries could not invest in China. The aftermath is that many countries are still investing much less than they were in China than prior to corona. So let's now address the Trump administration. Of course, we know that during the first Trump era, he, especially towards the latter part, once he instituted, of course, the trade and then technology war, he became sort of known for a very combative stance towards China. And of course, that had very profound implications for Taiwan. Especially important was the 2018 Taiwan Travel Act, which increased basically cooperation and interaction between Taiwanese and American officials. And once again, we had large arms sales to Taiwan swiftly being approved, and so on and so forth. One has to note, though, that this was not being done out of the goodwill of the Trump administration that cares so much about Taiwan, but I would rather say that Taiwan sort of became a card to be played, or an essential element for countering China's ambition, right? Particularly in the South China Sea and East Asia. So finally, Trump 2.0, of course, the second term we know will have profound implications for US-China relations, and of course also EU-US relations and EU-Taiwan ties. Especially for Taiwan and Europe, it's important to debate as has been going on, how to position oneself in this US-China competition amidst the sort of reverberation that the competition has on our own security and trade spheres. This is nothing new. It was going on even under Biden with, of course, the CHIP Acts and how certain companies like ASML should position themselves and so on and so forth. But it's taking a new dimension now with Trump and, of course, the new tariffs and all of that. One thing that has been debated recently is, of course, what the Trump administration stands towards Taiwan is, in light of the fact that they seem to be approaching the Ukraine-Russia war in a way that worries many people in Taiwan for small countries and the value in being protected. That, of course, we have seen does not seem to be the priority or the main concern of the Trump administration. And so there's been a lot of focus on this sentence that the US State Department deleted, this symbolic phrase from its usual update on Taiwan, which previously noted very clearly we do not support Taiwanese independence. And the debate, of course, was, is this sort of a signal to China that suggests that the Trump administration is ready to actually take a much stronger stance and even support, in this sense, Taiwanese independence? Or is there another scope, which is actually to improve the United States' bargaining power at the table in a so-called trade deal with China, right? So my point being, I think we can talk more during the Q&A about what the Trump's administration stands towards Taiwan are. But my point being is that Taiwan will remain actually a key player in geopolitics in the near future. And that the comments, of course, we can certainly say seem to shift the importance that Taiwan previously had under the Biden administration, which was on the support of the island for its democratic values, to something much different, much more economy-based and transaction-led sort of support that is really conditional on how much Taiwan is actually able to contribute and pay the United States for its assistance, including, of course, the provision of defensive weapons. I actually could talk more, but maybe Ijie, you let me know. Otherwise, I can keep this for the conversation and Q&A, because I think also Bo-jun only took 15 minutes, so I don't want to
We
overdo
still
it.
have some time, so if you would like to continue a little bit longer, it's okay.
Okay, I have, I think, one last slide, more or less. Yes, just let me say one thing. So the very final 2 minutes. So how have things been changing and what kind of impact does it have on Europe? I mean, clearly during the Biden administration, we saw a very close positioning by Ursula von der Leyen, sort of following the US lead for what concerns both not only transatlantic relations, but especially what kind of stance to keep towards China and, of course, de facto towards Taiwan. So whether now we'll have a very different positioning in the EU, whether the EU will continue to align, for example, on US policies regarding Taiwan, I really think depends on the evolution of the US-China relationship, as well as on how Trump will continue to decide to act towards Russia and, of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think that, of course, the European capitals have been shocked by the recent meetings between, of course, the Trump administration and the Putin administration, and that China, to a certain extent, despite the trade war, is actually benefiting out of the fact that Trump has decided to, retreat the United States from a variety of multilateral fora, and that will help China, at least in certain parts of the world, to carry out more successfully this divide and conquer strategy, making, of course, very clear to European capitals and the global South, the idea that the United States is not reliable any longer. We cannot count on it. So in other words, China will use this geopolitical opportunity to drive a wedge among the transatlantic partners. Whether the charm offensives will work or not, I think actually that there are two reasons why we may say they will not be working as they would have had before Corona. One of them, of course, is that in the past, Europe has become, in the past 5 years, much more protective of its markets and fears, of course, Chinese overcapacity, just mentioning the batteries, for example, and unfair trade practices. And the second one is related more to geopolitics and really is the fact that in European capitals, since already 1.5 years, we have started debating very openly the fact that the war in Ukraine is being sustained with China's help. And so I think that they won't be particularly successful in their charm offensive. again, I think I'll stop here and we can keep the rest for the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simona. And so we have around 20 minutes for the Q&A session, and we already have a few questions, but I would like to ask you, both of you, from myself, because Simona mentioned that Trump is like prioritizing trade deficit, burden sharing, and the revival of the American manufacturing nowadays. And in the meantime, the semiconductor giant TSMC, as Simona mentioned, recently announced that it will further expand its investment in Arizona, which is supported by the current Taiwanese government. How will Trump's policy and TSMC's expansion in the US have an impact on EU-Taiwan's collaboration on strengthening semiconductor supply chain security? Do you think Taiwan might lose its interest in collaborating with the EU or the Southeast Asian country on such an issue? It seems they're so focused on enhancing the semiconductor collaboration with the US at the moment. Like, what do you think about it?
Are you asking me or Bojin or both?
You can start, Simona.
Okay. I don't think that they lose interest in cooperating with Europe at all, in the sense that I think what the Lai administration is doing, first of all, TSMC is a company, so there's only so much that, you know, a government can do to veto or not veto the private decisions of a private corporation. What they are doing now, investing this, as you said, $100 billion, whether it is out of the, you know, pressure from the United States or the fact that they want to avoid paying high tariffs because they're de facto producing in the United States rather than in Taiwan, that it can be both. They are trying certainly to please to a certain extent, and I think they have no other way of going around it, the Trump administration. But I think, as Bojian was also talking about, the diversification that they're trying to implement, because that also helps them to become more self-reliant. And that, I think, would be a big mistake to actually focus only on the United States. And I think that they won't do that mistake because they are very much aware that, to a certain extent, Europe and Taiwan are in the same boat. We are being rocked by a giant. We are in the midst of, on the throes of these seismic changes. And it is in both of our interests, Europe and Taiwan, to find some sort of common cooperation, but also a lone standing position if possible. So I think it would be in their interest to continue to diversify as much as possible, including, of course, doing that with the EU, with Japan, with South Korea, and with the United States. So one does not exclude the other, to go back to your question.
Bojin, do you have anything to
add? Regarding this on Southeast Asia, I think well, TSMC is the most, it's the biggest chips company in Taiwan, if not in the world, right? But it's not the only company. So there are other chips manufacturing companies, for example, UMC or Global Foundries, and in recent year they have expanded their investment in Southeast Asia, in particular Singapore. And so these projects are ongoing. And well, for TSMC, they do have mature manufacturing facilities in Singapore, but they not for the most advanced ones in the region. So I know, as far as I know, a lot of ASEAN countries, they want, as I pointed out in my slides, they want Taiwan's investment in advanced technology, especially in the chips industry. So and they definitely want TSMC's investment. I know Malaysia in Penang, they want to build another. They also want to compete in this Silicon Valley. Southeast Asia Silicon Valley, right, competition. So want to be the next Silicon Valley. So so I guess, the 100 billion, it's definitely a huge amount of investment. And well, there's a debate about whether they will hollow out of Taiwan's chips industry, decrease affect the silicon shell, as Simona pointed out. So that's definitely the debate. I think is worth discussing. But however, I think for other we have to also pay attention to other countries' expansion their investment strategies in the region. And I do think for some companies, Southeast Asia is still an ideal region for this company to invest, and given the geographic proximity and probably culture or working culture or other norms, other benefits that the region can offer.
Thank you for the answers. And there's another question from anonymous audience. And the question is, how has Beijing reacted to the Taiwanese NSP Plus efforts? Has there been any notable resistance or repercussions from the Chinese government?
Okay, I'm still I've unmuted myself, so I'll just answer this question. I think NSP or NSP Plus, because they are coming from their policies of the DPP administration. So by default, Beijing usually wouldn't endorse that, right? Because they think, oh, you're just you want to diversify away from the Chinese markets, and instead of going west, the DPP administration focused on the south, and now it's global, right? It's omni-direction, omni-bound, except China. So definitely they are against this policy, and they think if they want, they think they're suspicious about the motive of it. And it's not surprising that they question the motives of it, because I think Beijing links this with Taiwan's independence movement as well, right? Because you're going away from the mainland market, you're less dependent on the Chinese market, then it will it's not in Beijing's China's interest. So overall, I think they are not very supportive, definitely, of DPP's new southbound policy. Even though the southbound guidelines were, I want to point out that under Ma Ying-jeou, actually, a lot of people didn't know he's actually also pursuing kind of his own southbound policy, but just that without the banner of southbound, right? Without the banner of Go South policy, because he didn't want to have these implications. Okay, not going west, but but rather just to focus on Southeast Asia. But under DPP, it's very clear that diversification is a clear objective of the Taiwan's international economic strategies. So yeah, but now anyway, in any case, I think Beijing definitely, it's not happy about the direction of this policy.
Okay. And there's a question to Dr. Greino. So as you mentioned that the EU's policy regarding Taiwan has been shifting the language and focus, do you see so far any possibility of this shift in the future go towards other fields than economic security, for example, such as an SP Plus during Tsai's administration, focusing more people-to-people connectivity? Can the EU and Taiwan also reflect this in policy in the future?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, I think that if I see other spheres of cooperation for the future, they definitely would be not in the security realm or in the fully fledged, diplomatic or political cooperation, but mostly in the support we can provide to Taiwan to be more actually involved in multilateral fora, or for example, people-to-people exchanges and digital industries that I've talked about a little bit. I think, though, that security sphere will remain off limits, and it will be difficult under the current administration of Trump for Europe to kind of maintain the sort of more unified approach it had in the past 4 years, precisely because, of course, in many countries of the European South, Spain, Italy, the economic situation is not going well. And this kind of pressure and sort of approach that the United States has towards Europe at the moment is splitting the former unity. So if anything at all, I think what Europe can provide to Taiwan is more cooperation in terms of building alliances with it, be it trade alliances or, as I said, more exchanges. Taiwan should do that and try to do that also in the Indo-Pacific, because I think that these kind of alliances will mitigate the risks associated with the current US administration's unpredictability and foster economic stability and growth. And in turn, this can create a sort of deterrent against Chinese aggression. The more countries involved, the higher their deterrence, of course, right, in helping out Taiwan. So they should, Europe and Taiwan, really sort of try to see that whenever it's possible and wherever it is possible, to increase their bilateral relationship, to decrease their dependence from China and the United States, and improve also resilience from external shocks.
Borjin, do you have anything to add on this question? Then there's another question, is also related to the EU. And given that the EU is a regional and economic power, what are possible security guarantees that the EU can give to Taiwan?
Yeah, it's related to what I just said. I don't know if we can give any security guarantees. Of course, I would put it like this. If you just think about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, before the corona pandemic, no one talked about Taiwan very much, unfortunately, unless it was, of course, due to any sort of skirmish happening in the Taiwan Strait with China. That changed exponentially starting during the corona pandemic for all the reasons we have mentioned before, from the supply chains to the more aggressive behavior that China has had and the unfair trade practices. So I would say that after that, of course, the semiconductor industry gigantic role of TSMC has brought certain think tanks like the Rhodium Group and Bloomberg Economics to crunch numbers and tell us what exactly would cost to have a blockade, $2.5 trillion annual losses, or a fully fledged conflict scenario. That was Bloomberg Economic 6 months later. It was minus 10% of global GDP. In comparison to Ukraine or also the pandemic that we had lived through, this is so much bigger. So, the security guarantees, I see them very difficult to be forthcoming from Europe towards Taiwan, because we're still very much divided, and this kind of geopolitical situation is not conducive to European countries taking bolder steps. However, and I will finish with this, the fact that we now know that prosperity and stability all over the world depend on stability in the Taiwan Strait increase very much, of course, the deterrence and the interest of other countries. And that is why tensions have been growing, because while previously China thought this was an internal affair, even though Taiwan has been losing allies since 2016, we have seen the so-called internationalization of the Taiwan issues, which has become way more advanced in the world than it previously was. And I think that's, of course, even though it raises tensions, it's still beneficial to raise attention to the Taiwan issue.
Thank you for the answer. Borjin, do you have anything to add on this?
Yeah, I think as Simona pointed out, I think security guarantees is hard. It's very hard to come up with one from the region. But however, I think beyond, definitely, I just want to point out that there is ideological alignment between Taiwan and Europe, in most European countries, and I think there are strong. On the academic front, there are strong practical incentives for Taiwan and most EU countries to deepen economic ties. We talk about advanced technology. So because not just in Taiwan, but also many countries in the region, they have strong industrial expertise and talent. So making them very natural partners for Taiwan in key sectors such as chips, right, precision machinery and automobiles. So and we know that numerous two-way investment projects have already taken place. For example, Foxconn has invested in Slovakia, I think, in recent years, has expanded their investment, and of course it's two-way street, not just one-way street. A lot of European countries is the largest FDI source in Taiwan. So. And with that, stronger economic ties, I can kind of provide some security right? Because you tie these two, the Taiwan and Europe region, they tie together, then closer, and then there will be more interest for European countries to pay attention to the stability and stability and peace across the Taiwan Strait, and that is in the U.S. and EU interest to protect Taiwan from invasion from China. So that way, I think from be more pragmatical and pragmatic, that for both sides to collaborate in on the economic front will help increase security in the Taiwan Strait.
Yeah, I fully agree that the economic collaboration between EU and Taiwan is for sure the biggest point that I guess Taiwan can use at the moment. Here's another question, and it's about India. So India, the world's fifth largest economy, is considered a key player and a powerhouse of the South Pacific region. Do Taiwanese industry giants such as TSMC have any plans plan for large-scale investment in India, or is there any other type of technology and R&D cooperation in place as a part of the NSP Plus? Hojin, would you like to start answering this question?
Sure. Of course. Well, I can't tell you more now because there are not the Lai administration hasn't published their new Southbound Policy Plus policy paper or guidelines. So there's no document to analyze right now. So but definitely India is included because India was included in new Southbound Policy under Tsai Ing-wen, and as the one of the most important target countries for this initiative. And in recent years, when Taiwanese business people, Taishan, they talk about diversification or de-risking, they definitely look into Indian or South Asian markets in general. So alongside Southeast Asian ASEAN markets, right? Yeah. But I don't know whether the DSMC. I'm sure. I know Foxconn has considered investment in India and other small and medium companies or other chips companies. Of course, they are looking into Indian market, but I'm not sure about TSMC plan on this.
Dr. Rhino, do you have anything to add on this?
Well, I'm not an expert, of course, on India and Taiwan, but from what I heard is, India has been one of those countries that is often talked about as a potential alternative to pursuing a China +1 strategy in this sort of diversification or de-risking approach. And in light of this, I read some articles in regards to how India is trying to seek investments from Taiwanese company in order to offset, for example, Chinese influence on its own industry. And so I definitely see the potential. But as Bojian said, we probably need to wait and see concretely what comes out of the new update of the strategy. But I definitely see a possible cooperation. I mean, India also, geopolitically speaking, has had some struggles in the past at the border with China. And so even though the relationship has meanwhile stabilized, it is, of course, very careful and also wants to offset the neighbor by diversifying and needs, of course, Taiwanese technological know-how.
Yeah, that's there's another question that's also related to the technological sector. So the question is about deepening the cooperation in the technological sector, both research and production between Taiwan and the Nordic countries as a unified group. And do you think there's a prospect in the future between the collaboration between Taiwan and the Nordic country, or do you think it will more focus on Taiwan, Germany at the moment? Simona, would you like to start?
I guess this question should be posed to someone who actually observes Nordic countries, which unfortunately I should be doing more, but I haven't been doing that much. But I would turn the question around and say, I don't know how much it depends on Taiwan only. I think it is often the offer and request that need to start at the level of Nordic countries or, for example, Switzerland. There's only so much Taiwan can do if the recipient country is not willing to receive certain kind of endowments or exchanges, right? I speak, for example, from Switzerland, where I know that the government is, in my opinion, very much careful about doing anything with Taiwan because of fear of upsetting its relationship with China. And so I have no answer for the very good question of the speaker in regards to Nordic countries, but I would say that it's probably not just up to Taiwan, but the request for the bilateral relationship needs to come out of Nordic countries, which may be more in tune to doing something like that with Taiwan than Switzerland, mainly because, of course, they feel much more, due to their geographic position, the brunt of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So they may be more ideologically prone to actually, expand cooperations with Taiwan than Switzerland is, since we are surrounded by, friendly countries in that sense.
Bojin, do you have anything to add on this?
Yes. So yeah, I mean, I'm not focusing too much on Nordic Taiwan relations. However, I do want to point out that given Nordic countries and Taiwan's ambitions for advanced technology, again, that makes both sides natural partners in this field, and it's economics, and so it's not that I would argue it's not that sensitive, and there's some advantage on both sides to work together. Is that I think both sides, they have a shared commitment to digital innovation, and given these countries are democracies, there's the rule of law, their commitment to the rule of law and intellectual property protection, and so I think definitely there are significant. There is significant room for collaboration and for expansion on this ground. Yeah, it would be just because their commitments to the rule of laws. Yeah, so there are definitely incentives for business people to invest in this, and so it's good for both sides to secure critical positions in the global advanced technology supply chain.
Thank you for the answer. And unfortunately, it's already 11, so I have to wrap up this webinar. And special thanks to our speakers, Dr. Jin Bo-jun and Dr. Simona Graino's presentation and comprehensive answers. And I would also like to express our gratitude to our audience, active participation, and thank you for all the questions. And your engagement has truly enriched our webinar and discussion today. And I hope to see you in our next webinar. Thank you for both speakers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.